he has made it clear from his perspective that staying in Cleveland equals not winning a Super Bowl. And when I say local, I mean a non-Super Bowl contending team, which may be the reason that Myles Garrett has requested a trade.
Yep.
Now, words speak volume. And when I look at this trade, there's a sentence in Myles Garrett's statement that I would highlight and start a discussion. So I will. I'm going to read the whole thing and then I'm going to tell you what stood out to me. He said, as a kid dreaming of the NFL, all I focused on was the ultimate goal of winning a Super Bowl, and that goal fuels me today more than ever. A statement that Garrett read. These past 8 years have shaped me into the man I am today. While I've loved calling Cleveland my home, my desire to win and compete on the biggest stages won't allow me to be complacent. The goal was never to go from Cleveland to Canton. It has always been to compete for and win a Super Bowl. With that in mind, I have requested a trade from the Cleveland Browns now. The sentence that stands out to me is the goal was never to go from Cleveland to Canton.
Yep.
He is saying a lot in that sentence, but what stands out to me is that he has made it clear from his perspective that staying in Cleveland equals not winning a Super Bowl. And there are some people that think, oh man, you got to be that player that makes the difference. You don't want to be the player that, joins the Kevin Durant to the Golden State Warriors. They'll always put an asterisk next to your Super Bowl. But if you can be one of the players that creates a real culture shift within an organization like Giannis did for the Milwaukee Bucks and taking that team to the NBA Finals and winning the finals, that is what the gold standard is when fans talk about players. But I can't think of a player that could be any more impactful than Myles Garrett has been the last 8 years for Cleveland. So it is also true that it's a team sport. And that's why when people talk about Mahomes as the greatest ever, which I think he is, I still like to keep the perspective that winning a Super Bowl and going to a Super Bowl is a team accomplishment. There is no better there's no better example than the fact that Josh Allen hasn't been to a Super Bowl and Mahomes is trying to win his third in a row. It is not because Mahomes is that much better than Josh Allen. It is because the organization and the 52-man roster and the coaching staff and a lot of external factors that are outside of one man's control. And I feel like this is where Myles Garrett finds himself. He's saying, I've won all the personal awards. I've been Defensive Player of the Year. I've been the best defensive player in the NFL, arguably for 7-8 years in a row. I believe he won Defensive Rookie of the Year. He's been the guy that he was drafted to be, yet Cleveland isn't going to win a Super Bowl because of Myles Garrett. And I don't think he believes that there is a path to the Super Bowl through Cleveland, and therefore his personal goal of winning a Super Bowl cannot happen as long as he's wearing the orange and brown and he requests a trade. What do you make of this? This is obviously huge news for Cleveland Browns fans everywhere. Whenever you get a player as impactful as a Myles Garrett, a Von Miller, you always imagine that is going to be with you till the end. And there is the case with Von Miller that he was like, no, I want to be here when we get back to the playoffs, and I want to be a part of that change. And the Broncos moved him. This is a little different where you have Myles Garrett moving himself. What do you make of this?
So my initial thought, and I don't know if maybe you had the same or maybe other people out there also had the same, but when I read this, I was like, oh shit. But I wasn't like, Wow. Oh my God. This is the craziest news since Luka got traded to the Lakers, which is also insane.
Yeah.
I wasn't shocked because Myles Garrett makes a very, very good point. The Browns let go of a damn good quarterback in Baker, and they leveraged their entire future on Deshaun Watson. And that has not paid off. So Myles Garrett is looking out for himself, man. I mean, this is an obvious like, okay, if you can do what you did to Baker Mayfield and bring in Deshaun Watson, then there should be zero surprise that I'm wanting to make this step. I'm wanting to be traded and putting out a statement where it clearly says the ultimate goal was not to go from Cleveland to Canton. Those words right there, like you had mentioned, you're like, these are the ones I want to highlight. Those are strong words. He said it himself. The ultimate goal is to play in a Super Bowl and win a Super Bowl. I can't do it here because of what this GM, what this front office has done with
Right.
Deshaun Watson. He just can't. You're right. This is a team game.
Rick,
So he's got to. It's got to be a team win, and he can't do it in Cleveland.
they say never. I was told this in relationships, but never speak in totality. You don't want to use words like always and never. You never do this. You always do this. When Myles Garrett says the goal was never to go from Cleveland to Canton, he's implying that he never thought that Cleveland would win a Super Bowl from the moment he was drafted till now. Are you surprised about that?
So you could look at it in a couple ways. The way I look at it is it was never supposed to be a linear path from Cleveland to Canton. It was always supposed to have the stops of the Super Bowl on the way. So I know what way you're looking at it, but the way I read that and understood it was not a Joe Thomas career that he wanted. Joe Thomas was one of the best linemen in the NFL for the Cleveland Browns. I think maybe had a playoff game, one playoff game, I think. And that was Joe Thomas. He was an all-pro. He was a Pro Bowler. So I think Myles Garrett, in this sense, did not want to have a Joe Thomas type of career. Shout out Richard and shout out Nick in the chat and Daniel Barry right now. But that's how I read it. But I can see how you are coming up with what you said. And I think Cleveland Browns fans are looking at it the same way you're looking at it.
Yeah, and that's not. I mean, for me, like when I read that, it was. There are times where, people will try to twist words to try to fit a narrative, whether you want to be angry or happy. When I read that, naturally, that's just now. He could have just been speaking, and it wasn't as serious as it sounds. A lot of times, tone, body language, all this stuff is missing when you read it just in words. Now, moving on to the ultimate value of Myles Garrett, who was drafted a number one overall pick. And I think, what was it, just a couple weeks ago that there was an offer including 2 first-round picks, and Andrew Barry, the general manager, said that would not be enough to entertain the thought of a trade.
Yep.
That, to me, is surprising. I feel that 2 first-round picks is actually more than enough to move a guy like Myles Garrett, because Myles Garrett, as great as he is, all right, he's 29. He's going to be 30 next year. You just don't move 2 first-round picks for a defensive player that's 30, unless, I mean, Myles Garrett, he's close to the exception, but usually there's only one position we would even entertain this, and it's quarterback.
Yep.
I'm a little shocked that they wouldn't entertain it, because you got the cap and all the money that plays along with it. So do you feel like he's just bluffing, or do you feel like 2 first-round picks is enough to pick up the phone and have a conversation?
Oh, two first rounders is like you said, very generous. It is very generous. Myles Garrett, for all we know, probably has 5, 6, 7 years. He can also have a career-ending injury or something that nags him for the remainder of his career. But I think a first rounder, maybe a second rounder, couple of fifths, throw in a player instead of all those other picks. I think something can be worked with a first round pick, with one first rounder. I agree with you. And so does Richard. You're spot on in saying that 2 first rounders is generous. I absolutely agree. And the fact that the GM was like, we're not going to entertain that. I think he's kind of, building that value for Myles Garrett. And like you said, he's 30. He's been a defensive player of the year. He's been an all-pro, second team, whatever. He's got a ton of accolades. I think 2 firsts definitely gets the phone answered. But I think at the end of the day, you settle on 1 first if you can.
Yeah, 2 years remain on his contract. He had a $125 million extension, which I think is proven to be a worthwhile investment on the team's part. But the GM, I think he's going to have to be a little more open and willing to work with other teams if he's actually going to move him. And, if he did mean never the way that I interpreted it, maybe it's because his rookie year was the year the Browns went 0-16. And that was just like,
Jesus, you're right.
Oh, okay. Like, this is where I'm at. And then, they've only made the playoffs twice. And it wasn't until Stefanski was hired and they made the divisional round. But since that was in 2020. Since that, they've only made the playoffs one other time, and it was last year. And they lost to the Texans, and it wasn't a close game. It was a blowout.
Badly.
And also, it was like Joe Flacco. It was almost kind of like I don't want to say a fluke, but it was not the franchise quarterback leading his team to
It was a fluke.
a good enough record to it's not repeatable. They didn't even keep Flacco on the roster, and you're looking at next year, and they restructured Deshaun Watson's contract, so the Browns are going with Deshaun Watson. And I just feel like Myles Garrett is like, dude, every single year I go to the Super Bowl, I go to these events, and I get to see all these teams preparing, and it's like, I want to be that team.
Yep.
I want to be why do they get it and I don't? I'm one of the best players in the league. There's no reason that I should just settle for this. I'm about to turn 30. At any point, I could have a season-ending injury. Something could happen to me. I don't know how many more years I can play at an elite level. And maybe he believes I'm still at an elite level enough where I could take a team that's a contender to the Super Bowl. If I join the Ravens, if I join the Lions, if I join the 49ers, if I join the Eagles, the Packers, maybe, there's a lot of teams that are in a better position than the Browns right now. So I think Myles Garrett is just saying, hey, the clock is ticking, and I don't want to be known as one of these guys that, I was loyal to my fan base, but at the cost of what was really important to me. I need to do this for me because it's important to me.
He's going to go to the Falcons, and then I'm going to pick the Falcons to win the NFC South.
There's no way he's going to the Falcons.
They need a pass rusher. No. I look, if I was a Browns fan, would I be mad about this? I'd be upset. But as someone who's on the outside of this franchise, being like, you guys brought this upon yourselves, man. You guys welcomed Deshaun Watson and all the baggage he carried in with him. So if you guys want to be mad at Myles Garrett for requesting a trade, look at what this same organization did to Baker Mayfield, the guy who took you to the playoffs for the first time in fucking forever, and who is now in Tampa having an awesome second half of his career. So for Myles Garrett to do this and for fans to be mad, Go ahead, be mad. You guys do whatever you need to do. But for the fans who were like welcoming Deshaun Watson and all the baggage and making fun about it, hey, this is what happens to you guys. This is the karma that comes back around. And I'm not wishing any ill will towards the fans. I'm just saying you guys get it in a football dose. You guys get this karma in a football sense where you have an awesome coach, two-time coach of the year. You have a really good defense, and you had a good quarterback in Baker. But none of these three things could come together at once to make you guys a contender because of the moves that are made, man. So Myles Garrett, again, I wasn't shocked. He knows he's also coming up on his 30 years. He knows he's not going to be playing at the high level he's playing at forever. He wants to win a Super Bowl, man. Good for him. He should go to a team that's ready.
Yeah, and I mean, the whole reason they moved off of Baker is a 30-minute conversation in itself, which still is not clear for a lot of reasons. But you're right about players getting to an age where they're like, time is really ticking, and I really want to win a ring, or in some cases win another one.